the correct interpretation of the Convention of Law at
As
Sea,
you use the
1982.
word interpretation,
Well,
so
that's
there
what-
are different
that's what lawyers-
interpretations.
Yes, well,
all right.
then, so we do it.
The Labour government increasing deportations. Some human rights advocates are reportedly growing frustrated.
500,000 asylum seekers in a decade. That's the staggering figure Reform MP Richard Tice dropped like a bombshell during a fiery TV debate on illegal immigration. But is this number accurate? And what does it really mean for the UK? As Labour politicians squirmed in their seats, Tice didn't hold back. He accused them of failing to address the crisis, claiming their policies have turned Britain into a soft touch for illegal migrants. But are his proposed solutions, pushbacks, and legal returns to France really the answer?
Asylum seekers in the last decade or so have come to the UK.
But that's disproportionate.
Hang on.
That's less
so if someone is
than almost
rejected,
every other
so
EU.
Behave by the rules and take these people back, we will never solve the problem.
Stick around as we unpack this explosive clash and its implications for UK immigration policy. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
It's clearly not a deterrent because 20,000 people have come since the Labour government won the election. And look, this is extraordinary.
The migrants are all coming from safe countries. They just don't want to be in Europe.
Richard Tice's claim of 500,000 asylum seekers in a decade has set off alarm bells across the UK. But is this figure just a political talking point, or does it reflect the harsh reality of the nation's immigration challenges? Let's dig into the numbers and see what they really tell us. Tice's assertion paints a picture of a country overwhelmed by an influx of asylum seekers. 500,000 over 10 years sounds staggering, doesn't it? It conjures images of overcrowded processing centers, stretched public services, and communities struggling to cope. But before we jump to conclusions, we need to put these numbers under the microscope. The impact of such a large number of asylum seekers on public services can't be ignored. Housing shortages, already a pressing issue in many parts of the UK, could be exacerbated. NHS waiting times, a perennial political hot potato, might lengthen further. And what about our schools? Could they handle an influx of children needing specialized language support and integration assistance? But here's where it gets interesting. Tice argues that the current approach isn't deterring illegal crossings. He's pushing for a more aggressive policy, suggesting that the UK needs to take a harder line. It's a stance that's sure to resonate with some voters who feel the system is being taken advantage of.
Remarkable that in Germany it wasn't illegal to people smuggle to other nations outside the EU, but this will make no difference whatsoever.
Been thrown out of Italy, which they reached by boat from Libya. Now, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is...
However, critics are quick to challenge Tice's narrative. They argue that the cost of supporting refugees in the UK is actually less than in many other countries. It's a perspective that forces us to question whether the UK is really shouldering an unfair burden, or if it's just convenient political rhetoric.
There is a silver bullet that will stop the boats. It's what we should have done under the previous government, but they didn't have the guts to do it. Legally, you've got to pick up and take back to France.
The illegally on boats in future would be refused sanctuary rights. So she's in control of her borders.
The complexity of the situation becomes clear when we consider the reasons why people seek asylum in the UK. It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Each asylum seeker has a story, a reason for risking everything to come here. Are we looking at economic migrants seeking a better life, or individuals fleeing genuine persecution? As we grapple with these questions, it's clear that a more nuanced approach is needed. Simply tallying up the numbers doesn't give us the full picture. We need to consider the long-term implications of our asylum policies, not just on our public services, but on our national identity and our place in the world. Just when you thought the immigration debate couldn't get more heated, Richard Tice drops a bombshell. He claims the UK can legally push migrant boats back to France under the United Nations 1982 Convention on the Law of the Sea. It sounds too good to be true, and maybe it is.
We're entitled to do under the United Nations 1982 Convention of the Law of the Sea. And what's interesting is I've been talking about this for over a year now.
We have to take control of this. The only way I can see it working is if they start the processing centres, perhaps in Calais.
What's the catch that could sink this plan before it even sets sail? Tice's proposal seems simple on the surface. Intercept the boats and send them back to France. He's so confident in his interpretation of international law that he boldly states, "No lawyer, no government minister, no civil servant has said I'm wrong, and there's a reason for that, because I'm right." But is it really that straightforward? The legal waters here are murkier than the English Channel on a foggy day. Critics point out that France hasn't exactly rolled out the welcome mat for this idea. In fact, they've given it a resounding none. Tice himself admits France has not consented to the return of vehicles to its waters. This lack of consent isn't just a diplomatic hiccup, it's a potential legal minefield. Imagine for a moment the chaos that could ensue if the UK started forcibly returning boats to French waters without their blessing.
No lawyer, no government minister, no civil servant has said I'm wrong, and there's a reason for that, because I'm right.
Well,
and they're embarrassed.
Well, that's not true.
Here, and there's lots of examples where these people have been associated to serious allegations. I think last week, Sue Reed, the person who did this very story.
It's not just about ruffling a few Gallic feathers. We're talking about potentially violating international treaties and straining relations with one of our closest allies. Is this really the kind of diplomatic tension we want to create over the Channel? But Tice isn't backing down. He points to Belgium as an example of a country that's got it right. According to him, the Belgian authorities pick up the boats themselves, which they're legally obliged to do under that same international treaty.
And then the French can sue us. That's how it works.
All right.
Actually,
To apply for asylum.
we've already done more than our bit. Over half a million
fine.
people.
All right.
The Mail newspaper today is reporting that nearly 1,500 migrants are waiting to cross the Channel in Calais.
It's an interesting comparison, but does it hold water? The situations in Belgium and the UK are quite different, and what works for one might not work for the other. Critics of Tice's plan argue that focusing solely on pushbacks is like trying to fix a leaky roof by mopping the floor. It doesn't address the root causes of migration or provide safe legal routes for genuine asylum seekers. They warn that oversimplifying the issue ignores the complexities of the migrant crisis and could lead to more dangerous crossing attempts. So, if not pushbacks, then what? The debate highlights the need for a more comprehensive strategy, one that addresses the reasons people risk their lives to cross the Channel in the first place. It's clear that international cooperation is essential, but how do we balance that with national interests and security concerns? The immigration debate in the UK has exposed a deep-rooted crisis in British politics.
But Karen, on your point, on Richard's point, I should say, that you didn't have the guts to do what Richard Tice and Reform UK is suggesting, and that's pushbacks.
You know, there's no simple answer, because if there were, I suspect governments would have done it.
But why? This is the problem many of you are having trouble under.
The inability to find common ground on complex issues. Public opinion polls reveal a significant divide, with many citizens expressing concerns over current policies and the perceived failure of politicians to address them effectively. This impasse isn't just about numbers or legal technicalities. It's about the kind of society we want to be. As viewers, we must look beyond the fiery rhetoric and consider the long-term implications of these policies. While some argue that the UK has done more than its fair share in accepting asylum seekers, others point out that the costs of supporting refugees in the UK are substantially less than in many other countries. This disconnect highlights the need for a more nuanced understanding of the issue. Experts predict that without bipartisan efforts and a comprehensive approach to immigration reform, the UK will continue to face challenges in addressing both humanitarian aspects and national security concerns. The real question isn't just about how many asylum seekers we accept, but how we balance our moral obligations with practical considerations. As we watch politicians clash on live TV, we must ask ourselves, are we ready for the difficult conversations and compromises necessary to move forward?